Hi folks, and welcome to this walkthrough of how a computer works when it's being built. This session will hopefully give you the knowledge that you need to be able to build your own machine. As you can see, this is what the computer looks like when it's powered on and everything's working fine. The monitor is playing Windows 8 and everything is functioning. So let's get into the computer itself. As you can see, this is my machine. The case is a Cooler Master, one of the brands to be looking for when you're picking your own parts. The case isn't the best looking, but it has the benefits of having extra fans, which means it's very functional, which means that it's keeping the machine very cool. As you probably know from previous readings, it's quite important to get a good quality case, so then keep your machine cool and make sure that everything works fine, and make sure that nothing overheats. Now we've run through the exterior, let's get into the internals of the machine itself. In this walkthrough, we will be working from the bottom to the top of the machine. So initially, we will be looking at the power supply. As you see, the power supply in this machine is running 650 watts. This can often run from 400 to 1000 watts, so this part is very important when you're picking your own, so that you can run a powerful enough machine. The power supply that I'm running is an average power supply, but it still has more than enough power to be able to run my machine. As you can see, the cables that are coming out of the side of it are to supply the rest of the machine, and it makes sure, and as you can see, they're feeding out the back, and because they're feeding out the back, it makes sure that all the cables are tidy, and this makes sure that there's not much clutter in the machine. Hi, in this part of the tutorial we're going to be talking about the graphics cards. This is one of the most important parts of a gaming machine, as this dictates how fast a game can perform. People usually recommend to budget about a quarter to a third of your budget of your build to this part. Usually saying an £800 build, you should recommend about £200 to £250. The card that I'm running in this machine is an Asus 660 Ti. It's about 12 months old now. When I bought the card it was about £240. Obviously now this card's a little bit older, so you can get the later models such as the Asus 770 Ti, which is the next model along, for a similar kind of price. I'll put a link to that on the webpage. Usually we recommend to go a little bit more expensive when you're buying a graphics card. It's so that you haven't got to keep constantly updating them for when new games are coming out. So if you initially put a bigger amount of money down on your graphics card, it means you won't have to update it at a later date. A graphics card is usually dictated by how much RAM the machine's got. This card in this machine has 2GB of RAM, but most general cards now I've got 3GB to 4GB of RAM in them. This card is still powerful enough to be able to run most games of today. So if you are spending £250 now, any graphics card that you're going to be able to buy is going to be powerful enough to be able to run your machine. The graphics card is quite integral in the machine because it dictates how fast most things run. As this is what renders the pixels onto your screen, it's going to dictate how fast stuff loads and how fast a game can run. So from this we're going to move on after this to the motherboard, as you can see, which is a little bit behind it, which is there. So we're going to run on to that next, so we'll be back in a second. As I said, we're now moving on to the motherboard. The motherboard is an integral part of the machine as it contains the machine's BIOS. From your previous readings you probably understand now how important a BIOS is, because it allows you to overclock your machine. But we'll be talking about overclocking later on in this session, which may be the further requirements task of this session. The motherboard also contains your basic inputs, so this is things such as USB and your sound ports. This is also what you're going to be fixing most of your parts to. As you can see, as I pan down, your graphics card is mounted to it, and as I pan up, you can see your RAM to the right, which are the red sticks there, and this is your CPU cooler with the processor underneath. I'll now move to the back of the machine to show you the inputs that it has. This is the back of the motherboard. As you can see, it's got some basic inputs such as USB 3, which are the blue slots, and the black slots, which are USB 2. The three colours at the bottom are to do with your sound, so these are like your audio inputs and outputs and your mic input. You can also see the Ethernet port, which is on the bottom right. You have some basic monitor inputs such as your DVI and your VGA. Also above that you've got your HDMI as well, which is another basic input. And above this you can see the purple and the green inputs, which are an older type of connection, which is for your mouse and your keyboard. So if we now pan down, you can see some of the rest of the inputs. As you can see, these two prongs here are the wireless adapter. This wireless adapter is put in aftermarket because the motherboard doesn't actually come with one. So if it's a case that your motherboard doesn't come with one, you're going to have to buy one extra. A lot of motherboards now do come with wireless built in, but some still don't. So as you pan further down, you can see some of the inputs. These are for the graphics card. So you've got another DVI and you've got a HDMI slot. These are what you would usually plug your stuff such in as a monitor or dual monitors if you're running them. Okay, so we'll now move on. As you can see, this is the RAM of the machine. The RAM of the machine is quite integral because it also dictates how fast your machine can operate. This is so the processor can allocate programs to memory without having to have any kind of sequence to it. And you see these are the slots for it, which I'll show you, which I'll zoom in on now. This is a Vengeance Corsair RAM. It's more of a gaming RAM, so it's a lot quicker. I'll now show you some examples and I'll show you the difference between a traditional stick of RAM and a gaming piece of RAM. Okay, as you can see, these are the two types of RAM. The stick on the left is more traditional. This is usually about a 1 gig stick of RAM. The one on the right is out of my machine itself. It's a 4 gig stick of Corsair Vengeance RAM, which runs a lot quicker at 1600 MHz. As you can see, the casings are also different. The RAM on the right has a lot better cooling, so it can keep the RAM a lot cooler, which can stop any damage going into your machine. The stick on the left is what you'll usually find in things such as laptops and more basic machines. It's quite clear that the stick on the right looks a little bit different because it needs to be able to keep cool, so it can keep up with the gaming spec that you're building. So a Corsair Vengeance stick, these will now retail for about £50, about 4 gig of RAM. This may be a little bit cheaper depending on which model you choose, but usually 8 gig to 16 gig of RAM is more than sufficient for a modern gaming PC. Okay, we're now going to move on to the cooling and we're going to look at the processor as well. Right, as you can now see, this is the CPU cooler. Underneath this is the processor. Unfortunately, I won't be able to show you this as it's already fixed down with the thermal paste, and if I were to take these off it may break the CPU. But I will link now to some diagrams to show you how it will work and how a processor will fit. It usually has to fit in a certain cradle so that the processor can be there firmly, and after that you're going to be applying some thermal paste to this, so as it connects to the CPU cooler it can keep everything running coolly. This is a air cooling fan. Unfortunately it's quite large, but it does work quite well. Yeah, as you've probably read from the hardware section of this website, you have two main choices. You have liquid cooling, which usually works from a small plate which runs water to a cooling fan on the exterior, or you also have this, which is just a regular fan, which is a heat sink, so it will help to draw any heat from the processor and expel it into the rest of the machine. As you can see, there is a small fan behind it, which I'll show you now, which is this. This fan can help to cool the machine as it helps to draw a lot of heat from the processor itself, so it kind of works as an exhaust for the machine. And from that now I will show you the storage of the machine, such as the SSD which I'm running and the hard drive. After this we're going to then put the machine back together and I'll show you how the machine boots up and how the BIOS works for the machine. Okay, thank you. Right, as you can see, the black cord, which is in the centre of your screen now, is leading to a small black box. This is the SSD. As your previous reading can probably explain, the SSD is a lot faster than the hard disk drive, which I'm also running in this machine. It's also running my operating system and some of the major programs that I want. This is mainly because it helps to boot the machine up a lot quicker and it helps my programs to open faster. And you see a lot of the cables that are leading to it are running from the power supply itself, with the cabling that is running out the back of the machine to the left, which is keeping all the cables tidy. I'll show you a shot of that in a minute to show you how the cable tidying works and making sure that the machine looks well. I'm also now going to show you the hard disk drive itself and show you the primary storage of the machine. This is the hard disk drive of the machine. It's going to be storing most of my primary storage, so things such as films and files. It is run by some of the SATA cables which are going to be running from the left of the machine, which I shall pan to now. So as you can see, these cables here are my SATA cables which are going to be transferring data through the rest of the machine. One of them is connected to the SSD above and the other one is back down here in the hard disk drive. Obviously all of the power cables also running in the back of the machine, as I said previously, with the SSD. So now I'm going to close up this side of the case and we're going to see the back of the machine so we can see how all the cabling works and how the machine all fits together itself. Okay, thank you. Right, as I said, this is now the back of the machine. As you can see here, these are some of the wires that have been fed out backwards to the back of the machine. These are all the power cables that are coming out from the bottom. These are from all the power supplies which are in this corner here. As you see now, these are all the data cables and all the SATA cables that we have in the machine. So this case is quite a good one because obviously you've got this back panel here which can keep all of the cables separate and make sure it's tidy so it's not in the main compartment of the machine. As I said earlier about the CPU cradle, this is the backing of it and this is the backing of the motherboard. So this in front of this is where you're going to be fixing your processor to, and on top of that, that's going to be where you're going to be fitting your CPU cooler. Okay then, so now I'm going to put the machine all back together and we can do a quick overrun of how all the parts for the machine and how fast the machine is running. Okay then, thank you very much. Okay then, now we've finished with a quick view of the internals of this machine and how certain parts are fitted together. Hopefully you've now got a better understanding of where certain hardware needs to be fitted in the machine and how everything looks on the insides. Hopefully this will give you a little bit better understanding of how the hardware works, and it's just to reinforce your knowledge of some of the stuff that you're going to be reading on the website in this session. As you can see, the computer's now working fully fine. It's playing a video in 1080p. Everything's switched on. Obviously you can see all the mouse, the LEDs and all that kind of thing. I'm also going to do a quick one down now of all the parts I've got in this machine. For example, the processor in it is an i5-4670, which will run about 3.5 gigahertz. Gigahertz, as you probably understand, are how fast a processor is rated by. This is also in the website. It's got an ASUS 660 Ti graphics card, which is quite a powerful machine, but you can now get the 770 Ti for a similar kind of price. It's mainly because that this card's now about 12 months old. The motherboard is an ASUS Z87. It's usually costs about £70 and it will be able to fit most of the modern processors in them, mainly like the 4th gen Intel i5s, which is probably going to be what you're going to be looking at when you're building your own machine. RAM wise, it's got 8GB of gaming RAM, which is Corsair Vengeance, running about 1600 MHz. You've probably seen this at previous points of the video. It's also just running a little bit extra 2GB RAM, which is just spare RAM really, just so it can just aid in the power and the speed of how the machine's running. It's running a 650 watt power supply, which is just at the start of this video, which is going to be powering the machine quite strongly, and it's still got more power left over. Storage wise, we've got two types. We've got an SSD, which is about 64GB, which is usually enough to be able to run your operating system and some basic programs, but now that the SSD's got a little bit cheaper, you may want to invest in a larger size. We've also got a 1TB hard drive in the machine, which is going to be storing the primary stuff, so films and music and games. It cost me about £80, but now it's a little bit cheaper. You can probably get one for about £50. As I've also shown you in the machine is the CPU cooler. CPU cooler is about £50. Obviously it's quite large, so you may want to choose another one so you can fit more RAM into your machine, but it does work quite well as it does keep the machine very cool. The case itself, which I will hand to now, is a Cooler Master. It cost me about £80, but it's a very functional case with extra fans in, so it can keep the machine nice and cool. So you may want to choose a different style of case, because obviously this one isn't the most interesting case that you can get. Then we're going to talk peripherals wise. As you can see, the monitor is a 23-inch LG monitor. It can run up to 1080p. It's got DVI and HDMI inputs. My keyboard and mouse, they're both Corsair. They are paired Kone peripherals, so they can work together. And also I've got a basic 2-to-1 speaker system, which is running the two speakers, as you can probably see on the side of the machine, and there's a subwoofer also being run down below. The LEDs, the pink that you can see behind it, is a lighting strip that I've installed into my desk. You can get these on eBay for about £15, and as you can see, adds a nice back glow to the machine. So obviously from this video, hopefully you've got a little bit better understanding of how the hardware works, and as we carry on this session, I'll be linking to certain tutorials just so you can help put the machine together. and hopefully you're going to learn a lot from this session and make sure that you can put together your own PC. I'll be linking various tasks and stuff that you can do when you're building your own machine, and for a final kind of review for this, I'll put a short video further on in the site so that you can see what you're going to be needing to do yourself. Okay, thank you very much.